I'm not the most eloquent of speakers at times. I sometimes do these and people can't understand my accent, my Yorkshire accent, and I have to put a bit more of an RP on it and speak a bit more. You'll notice that through some of the things that I've done, but it's me. I'm not the mistakes that I made. If there's one thing that I can convey to anyone watching this, is you are not the mistakes that you've made. Situations that you found yourself in. Not the badness, you're not the sin, you're not the shame, you're not the guilt. Not your fault, and what other people think about you is none of your business.
Hi, welcome to Heartbeat with Harjeet. I'm your host, Harjeet Dillon. Today I have a guest from the UK, my hometown. His name is Jack Gregory. He's the accidental journalist. He's transformed a life marked by childhood trafficking, addiction, homelessness, and criminality into a powerful narrative of redemption and hope. After experiencing a profound near-death experience, Jack has found his turning point, discovering purpose, faith, and healing through creativity and connection with God. Today, Jack channels his past trauma into impactful advocacy and storytelling. He's the founder of the Council of Survivors' Voices, dedicated to amplifying the stories of those who have overcome similar adversities. As an accomplished author, journalist, and speaker, he courageously shares his journey to inspire resilience and authenticity in others. He also lends his unique insights as an authenticity consultant to film and television. So he ensures the accurate and sensitive portrayals of trauma and recovery are equivalent to what he's experienced. His own films have garnered recognition and he's been featured in international film festivals, further showcasing his remarkable journey and artistic talent. Through his writing, films, and speaking engagements, Jack Gregory continues to illuminate the path from pain to purpose, proving that our greatest struggles can become our most profound sources of strength. Welcome, Jack.
Thank you for having me.
There's so much. In a nutshell, you're one person, you can tell the story of so much trauma and so much overcoming trauma, how you've gone from a childhood that has involved so much negativity to be a person who advocates for change is remarkable to me. I applaud you for that because myself, I've not been exposed to this stuff. I know it exists, but it's only been on the TV. So thank you again for sharing your story. I want to start with your childhood because for somebody like me, my listeners, whatever kind of home people have been born into, not many people that I know would have been taken from their family or would be put in a place of such darkness.
I was born to darkness. My biological mum was only young. Yep. I was born in Glasgow in Scotland and I was brought over to England when I was 6 months old. My mum had some mental health issues, so I was taken away from her and I was given to a family to foster, and I was brought up in that family. But I was told on the Saturday before my 8th birthday, after my birthday party, and I'd had tea and cake and pop and crisps and a really nice set of presents. I got a teepee, like an Indian teepee for the garden. And I was sat on my mum's knee because I was a mummy's boy. I never really saw my adopted mum cry. She never really showed her emotions. She was very stoic. She was very private when it came to things like that. I only ever saw it a couple of times, and this was one of the times, and it was a tear. It was pretty much a single tear. And my dad was sat reading his newspaper, looking over every now and again at me and my mum, and she said, "We love you, but you're not our biological son. You have a mum that can't raise you. So you came to us when you were very little, but you're now ours because we've adopted you and because we fell in love with you, we chose you." For many kids, I think that would be a positive, but predisposed as my brain was to brokenness. It gave me this existential crisis at 8 years old where I was just trying to work out who I was. So I tried to be whoever I could. I would mimic people. I would mimic voices. I would tell lies. I would do all these things to try and find out what my identity was because I felt like I'd been robbed of my true identity. So I felt that I could give myself my own identity. And in that, I opened myself up to criminality. I opened myself up to what would become abuse. I opened myself up to violence, to a life I couldn't handle. The fact that I was adopted, because I didn't really know what adopted was. I knew that they'd become my parents, but there's so much more to adoption. I was struggled to read and write. I wasn't thick, but I was seen as very low intelligence when the fact was I was dyslexic. Uh, so I fell into the special school system. That became a very difficult place for me. I always had a mind for knowledge, but some of the other kids that went to that school, they were predisposed to violence and bullying from different family backgrounds to myself. And I opened myself up to a lot of bullying. And because I lied, there were people that took advantage of the situation. That's when the abuse started. Now, I blocked this out for many years. I didn't speak about it. I couldn't speak about it because it was just too painful. I was too trauma-filled. Because I lied a lot, they saw me as an easy target. This was back in the days before DBS checks. Adults could just go in and volunteer in schools. Bad behaviour in that school was rewarded with learning to climb and go caving and abseiling and canoeing. So by the time I left school, I barely read or write my own name, but I could quite competently teach canoeing. I left school with certificates on changing a fuse and a plug, first aid, and riding a 50cc moped, because they just saw us as stupid, so they treated us that way, expecting us to do the bare minimum. But there were not teachers, there were adults that were involved within that took advantage, and that's when the abuse started for me. It was an older man to start with, giving me drink and drugs to keep me passive, because this was after I got caught with weed and white lightning cider that I used to drink at the back of the school bike sheds. Started then into being passed around to different adults under the guise of mentorship, under the guise of extracurricular activities. We would get to go caving and climbing and canoeing, but there was always a private tent that when the others were asleep, there were a couple of us that were moved into that. And that's when we were, I'll call it where it is, raped. For many years, I couldn't deal with that in my own head. And because when these things happen and they give you these things, they give you drink and they give you drugs and they treat you nicely, or they treat you better than you've been treated by other people. And you start getting used to these things that are happening. And I didn't mind it when the female teachers were there, because it didn't hurt. When it was the male teachers, it did. And I don't know, I was an easy target, I guess. That happened into late teens, early adulthood.
Like, from what I'm hearing, it's not understandable to people that have grown up with biological parents, because once you know your biological parents, when you're with them, you can kind of see yourself in each of them, and you can learn to accept yourself more, because you know what your father's like, you know what qualities your mother has, you know what you take from each of them, you know what you don't like about them, and you can work with that. You weren't even exposed to the biology of who you really are. And when you found that out, you really just confirmed that I was lost before, and now I just really need to find myself. So what you went through, when you say easy target, oh, absolutely. Because even if they didn't know what you were going through inside of yourself, they can see that we can control this man. We can make him so weak that we can feed off of his fear. We can control him, and we can have a tool in our little place of whatever they want to live in. They could have you there, because without vulnerable people, Without children that have hurt, without these victims, they wouldn't have anything to go on. Nobody talked to you about God that age. They just made you.
Oh, no.
Nobody even, your body is your temple. It's a sanctity, it's a haven. So when somebody touches it, you're justifying that when it was the females, it's okay. I know that's not really what you think. You just kind of made a narrative that helped you get through it and say that this is okay, this is normal, this feels okay. Because what else could you do? I'm just trying to guess what you were actually going through at the time.
Yeah, no, you're correct. Like I said, I preferred it when it happened with females because it didn't hurt and it was kind of pleasurable. It was more gentle, but at the end of the day, abuse is still abuse and rape is still rape. I was still unable to make an informed consent. I was too young, and even when I was legally old enough to do that, mentally, I wasn't really able to make informed consent. But I thought I was older than I was because these things were happening to me, and because natural things happened when I was broken, I thought that because natural things happened when some of these male teachers did these awful things, they tried to convince me that I was gay, that I liked it, and I battled with that for many, many years. The way that I put it in my head, it was painful with men more often than not. I guess I just resigned myself to it because I've had trolls tell me that because I took things from them, like drugs and money, that deep down I must have wanted it and I must have liked it. And that hurts when I get quite a bit of that, but I've learned to deal with it because I know that it wasn't my fault. I was too young to make an informed decision, as I've said. I was a vulnerable child in a vulnerable place, and these adults were taking advantage of that. And they did into my late teens, even after I left school, because they used excuses like, oh, well, we're taking climbing and caving. And I never told my parents. They never knew. I lost them both a couple of months ago. And as hard as it was, I know that they never knew. I think my dad kind of knew some of the things that I went through. I know he was showing some of my podcast stuff. He was a fan of my work. Every time I wrote a book, I sent it to him. Every time I did a film, I sent him the DVD. I spoke to him on the phone. My relationship with my adopted mother was complicated. She was a complicated woman, as I've said. I loved her to bits and kept myself away from that for a long time. I fell into criminality because I was a good liar. I became good at lying anyway. I liked the things that it brought me. I liked the rewards. I moved out of my mum and dad's as soon as I could when I was about 16, 17. I had a bed sit in a place called Pontefract in West Yorkshire because I grew up in a mining town. All these things that I'm speaking about, most people still to this day from there would never talk about things like this because that's not what a Yorkshire lad does, I left Yorkshire at the age of 22, 23, I think, and moved down south to a place called Gosport, and I spent a couple of years there. And then I moved up here after some trouble with the law and things like that. That's not something I really talk about because there's so many people that do podcasts like this and they talk about who they met in prison and what happened in prison. I hate the place. It's stifling, it's claustrophobic, and it's awful. In and out of rehabs and hospitals for mental health. I moved to Norfolk in 2001, where I'm currently now living. I met a woman and we got married, fell in love. She had 3 kids. When we got married, it wasn't long after we'd got married that we found out that she was pregnant and we had my daughter, and it was great. I was searching for something else, and I'd been sober and I'd had quite a bit of sobriety behind me. I'd been in and out of 12-step programs like AA and NA from the age of 14 because mum and dad always knew that I was an addict. They knew that I liked drink and drugs. And do you know what? My mum didn't mind a naughty boy. you know, she just didn't like it when I lied to her.
I'm just curious, your biological parents, did you ever find out who they were? Do you think that the addiction could have been any kind of
Yeah,
biology
yeah, I met my
from?
real mum. I had a relationship with my real mum from 2000 and I guess 2007, 8, up until she passed away in 2017. She was broken. Addiction runs in my family. Mental health problems run in my family. Dyslexia and things like that, they run in family. My mum was by far from stupid. She was a lovely woman. She was a lovely, lovely woman. She had her problems. I loved her to bits. But then again, she only saw what I wanted her to see. She only saw the me that I wanted her to see. When I proper fell into the addiction, I'd written a film and it was going to get made, and I had some big British celebrities that were looking at making it and producing it, and I was hanging about with these celebrities, and it was great. And I was drinking and I was doing coke and I was trying to hide it. And then I was working for a debt collecting company and going on nights out with them and days out with them and drinking and doing coke with the boss. And
I want to speak to like these coping mechanisms that you had, because if people haven't turned to them, they don't really understand why and how. And you say addiction runs in your family, but also then it starts from you being exposed to it. So you're already exposed to it biologically and it's already in your genetics. To have the willpower to work through something that you're feeling and you're fighting against something and nobody's there to talk to it, and you've got to figure it all out yourself. There's nobody showing you the ropes and telling you that life is more than this. This is the easy way out, in the sense, because you don't have to feel any pain. You just think that this is, you're in a different kind of world. And even though there's harm and there's abuse, you feel safe because the addiction is what's helping you cope with everything that's going on inside of the addiction and outside of the addiction. And to be at a place when I've never been an addict, but I know of some, and just what I learned to imagine to only have that one option. You don't see that there is any alternative. And to go without it, it's just like, well, this is just almost impossible. You can't even think that it's even possible.
I believe that I'm allergic to narcotics and I'm allergic to alcohol. I'm predisposed to a violent nature. I break out in violence every time I drink too much. I liked drugs. I did. I liked drugs. I'm not going to lie. They took me to a place where my mind could be quiet and calm. My ex-wife never knew about any of this, really, up until I started doing these podcasts and actually sort of learning to deal with my own trauma. I tried for years AA and NA, and I had people around me, I had sponsors and things like that, and it was okay. The best thing about these places is they're full of addicts and alcoholics and they know what you're going through, but the worst thing is they're full of addicts and full of alcoholics and they're human and they will backstab if possible and if needed. And it got also difficult. My marriage broke down. I ended up losing my house, almost losing my daughter. I ended up homeless, occasionally moving from friend to friend, from sofa to sofa, trying to hide this addiction, trying to hide this brokenness. And I couldn't. I couldn't do it anymore. And it took me to trying to commit suicide several times, and the last time I guess it should have happened because I took enough crack cocaine and heroin to certainly kill a horse. The first time I was going to do it, I was around March 2014, and I'd written this suicide note and I'd gone to a food bank because I wanted something to eat and I wanted to have a nice meal before I went, at least go on a full belly. I walked in and this is a place that I'd been to many times before, but I was greeted with this smile by this lady behind the counter, and she served me coffee and I had a Doctor Who t-shirt on. She said, I love Doctor Who. And we had this conversation. And despite being told not to afterwards, she took me out for a meal for something to eat, and she bought me tobacco and she bought me food. She saved my life that day because I didn't feel that after all that I wanted to do it. And then I had to go home for a little while because we'd lost a member of the family.
When you met her, your wife, was it before your near-death experience or after?
Oh, it was before. It was before.
Okay.
We added each other on Facebook, but we didn't see each other for a while. This was June. I'd been home for a funeral. I'd come back and I was broken. I tried to punch my way through my ex-wife's solid oak door after an argument. I'd scared my daughter half to death. I was so broken. I was lost, and I didn't feel any other. I didn't feel that there was any other way that I could live. I thought that people would be better off without me, that they could build a better life without me in it. So I wrote another note and I got some money together. And on the 26th of June 2014, 10 o'clock at night, I found myself in a crack house. And I'm sat there and I'm like, okay, I've got enough here to kill a horse, so it's going to do me. And I made sure that this note was in my pocket. I'd written bits for my ex-wife and for my daughter and for my mum and dad and my biological mum, my sister and my brother. It was about a 4-page note in an envelope, A4. And I took an almighty hit. But before I did, I said, God, I don't even know if you exist, but please take care of my family. I can't do this anymore. I can't live like this anymore. I can't live in lies anymore. I've lost everything. I'd been in and out of different relationships with different women. I'd been caught cheating. My behaviour was absolutely abhorrent.
Until you get to a turning point, there was nothing really driving you to change. There was nothing driving you to see anything else but what you were exposed to, right? So your behaviour was, I would say, justified based on your experiences. And that's why one of the things you said that last time when we talked, when I asked you, what's one thing that people like me could do different so that people like you don't have to be suffering from trauma the whole of their lives? You had said to not judge. When you judge people based on their behaviors and their actions, you're not seeing beyond that. Why are they doing those things? Why are they involved in that? What are they lacking? What are they missing out on? And just having an understanding of a person that's going to be an addict or be promiscuous or indulge in criminal behavior. When you do all those things, there's always a reason behind it. And people fail to understand that these people aren't always doing it because they want to. It's because it's the only way they know how. And until you had a turning point that pulled you out of this, meeting your wife sounds like that was the start of a turning point. And even when you say that you wrote a 4-page note, and before you said, God, I don't know if you exist, but if you do, please take care of my family. That to me speaks that you know God existed. Because if you didn't, you would have let go. But you're questioning it because you couldn't let go if you didn't believe in God. Because then who do you trust?
Exactly. I've had genuine experiences with God, but when it comes to it, I didn't feel like I really knew. I was like, God, look after my daughter, look after my family. They're going to be better off without me because I can't do this. I can't live like this anymore. I had a very expensive habit. I was doing it by hook or by crook. And I didn't want to be like that anymore. I didn't want to be the failure of a father that I was becoming. I loved my daughter to absolute bits. I didn't want them to be in pain anymore. When I thought losing me, it would be a pain for a little while, but they would then grow and get on without me because life always goes on.
It boils down to remembering that you are someone too and you matter, not just to people, because people had never made you feel like you mattered. And then it comes to a point where you realize people aren't going to necessarily make you feel like you matter. And then when you meet your wife, she sounds to me like an angel. She just came out of nowhere and changed your life, a part of your turning point. You never lost hope. Even though you were struggling and you were going through everything you were going through, you still held on to hope. You still had that. I'm always so touched when I speak to you and I hear what you went through because it's not just what you went through. There's a lot of people that haven't gone through the things that you have gone through. So they're listening to it like, is that really true? And then you have trolls saying that it's your fault, it's your choice. And that's what judgment is, right? It's blaming you for your choices. And to give people a sense of an understanding, I've never been in your situation. But if it's the only way you know how, there's nobody showing you anything else. And to reach out to God, even if God is going to show you, God's going to send you people, but you don't know who you trust when you've been in this. It's like it's our own discernment that we have to grow ourselves. And when you never had anybody that made you feel loved, you didn't love yourself, that you could just let go that easily. And you think that my children are going to miss me. They'll miss me for a little, but it's okay. Yeah. Not knowing that you matter. You matter to your children. You matter to more than your children. You matter to God because God put you in the place that he put you. Because to become an accidental journalist, I'm curious, did that title come about after the near-death experience?
Yeah, it did. Everything was kind of accidental, really. I'd got with Jo, my now wife. We've been married 6 years this year. I got sober in that crack house. I woke up. God brought me. He gave me freedom. He wouldn't let me off lightly. Death would have been light. I woke up at 12 on the 27th of June 2014. Haven't used a day since. I got with Jo later on in the year. I still had some criminality in me. I still had the man that needed to have sex to feel loved. So I still bounced around different women for a long time. And Jo and I got together towards sort of the end of the year. And things were great. I'd start putting on a little weight. I was 8 stone when we met. I think I'd got up to about 10 stone.
You know, when you go like not having weight to gaining weight, it's not like a sign of happiness. It's like a turn. It's like, finally, I can be myself. Like, I'm not worried. I'm not overthinking. I'm just eating. My body needs food. It's always you're putting yourself in a place of safety and comfort, which is something that you hadn't had for so long. So when you say you gained weight, I see it as like, I just saw a post that you did on Facebook where you had a picture of yourself before when you're going through everything and now. And the difference, you look so healthy now, right? There's so much health that's exuding out of you. On the outside, people can see it, but on the inside, nobody actually knows what you're feeling. Nobody knows what you're going through. So even though you have experienced all of this, the pain could come up at any moment. But even just recently, you mentioned you just suffered some losses. You lost your mother.
Well, my dad, within 13 days. It's hard, but I know my dad was proud of me. I got to say goodbye, which was the thing that many people don't get to do. My niece was on the phone with me all the time. I couldn't physically get up there. I was able to do video calls with my mum and dad, and the way they went was not nice, but it was easier to deal with, I guess. I have a very supportive community with my church, got a very supportive wife. I wasn't always able to deal with trauma and pain, and it's only after I wrote my second book, after working with escapees of human trafficking, sexual slavery and exploitation, a book called Between the Streetlights and Red Lights, I was able to look at my own pain and look at my own trauma and then start to work with it. That was in 2017 when I wrote that. And I know how to deal with grief, and I've done courses. But when we lost Mum on the 20th of March, and then Dad started to get ill not long after, and he died on the 2nd of April, the day after what would have been their 58th wedding anniversary. It was always apparent that they would never live without each other. We're always so interconnected. It was Wendy and Keith. Everyone knew them. It wasn't just Keith on its own. It wasn't just Wendy on its own. It was always Wendy and Keith, and they were this force to be reckoned with in this little mining town in Yorkshire. They were so loved by the community. All the love that, that's been passed on from people up there. It's been so nice. So, I've been able to deal with that. I'm able to deal with the grief because I've got a good support network. Sometimes I get a bit sad, a bit tearful, but I have a relationship with God. And that came because, like I said, I got together with Jo at, I guess, October, November 2014, and I put weight on and everything was great. And we had Christmas together and everything was great. And then after Christmas, I started losing weight rapidly. And I went down from 10, 11 stone to around about 8 stone, and I looked very gaunt. I was thin. My skin was going yellow. You could see my bones. My ribs were like a xylophone. It was just absolutely awful. And I had this cough for months, but I battled cancer a few times when I was homeless and beat it. I guess I thought I might have had it again, and I was hoping that it would go away. How you fall into that sort of old behaviour and just try and hide it. I was just scared.
The accidental journalist. I really love that name about you, because when you're saying all these things to me, I'm just like thinking in my head, were they really accidents or was it unintentional? Because intention brings you to where you are today, right?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I know I am incidental as a person in my career, but I never wanted to be that. I always knew maybe wanted to write a book, but I couldn't read or write, so I never thought I'd do it. I learned to read and write at 21 properly, but I still never thought I'd do it. But it was only after I almost died, I ended up in hospital. March the 19th, 2015, I'd lost all this weight, and I'd had my daughter for the weekend, and I'd taken her and my partner's kids to uptown, and we'd had tea and cake and stuff, because I love doing that as a dad. I love cafes and things like that. I couldn't eat, but on that day I felt well enough to eat a bacon sandwich, but that night I just became really ill. This cough had got so bad, I could barely breathe. I was shaking so hard, I was nearly coming off the bed. So on the Sunday, I rang my ex-wife and said, look, can you come and get our daughter? I'm going to have to call an ambulance. I'm going to have to go to the hospital. So no, I don't want to scare her. If you can wait an hour or two, I'll come and get you. I'll drive you to the hospital. You can give your daughter a kiss and a cuddle. You can tell her you're going to be all right, that you just need to get a bit better. So I did, and that was 4:30, and by 7:30 I was dead. My lungs had stopped working. I had type 2 lung failure. I had tuberculosis, a life of poverty. I had pleurisy. I had infections galore, and I was brought back. But the stuff that they had me on, that caused me to hallucinate. I became convinced that I'd caused the end of the world, that God was ending the world because I was so bad. I'd spread this super virulent strain of tuberculosis. I thought that everybody had been replaced by cyborgs. I was so sick, I was so ill. There were people coming in to pray for me from the church. I was physically trying to attack them. Had this rash that had come because I'd taken really bad to one of the medicines that they gave me. It was like I thought they'd burnt me with acid, and I wouldn't eat. They were trying to get food down me by tube. It was so hard because I thought God was punishing me. I wanted to die so badly. But then there was something at the end of my bed, and I didn't quite know what it was. There were people that come to see me from the church, and there were doctors that would come to see me. But there was this thing at the end of the bed, and I didn't know what it was, and it felt different to everything else, and it just felt a bit more peaceful. And I said, who are you and what do you want? And I heard this voice say, you know who I am and you know what I want. Well, what have I got to do then? You know what you've got to do. Deep down, you know what you've got to do. And I said, okay, if you're Jesus, I take you into my life right now. And the darkness that was in front of my eyes, that dark room, it was like somebody had switched a light on. My head was clear. I was sat up in bed, which I hadn't done for weeks. The nurse walked in, a nurse by the name of Jackie, who is my constant sponsor now. She sponsors my podcast and things like that. She came in and I said, can I have a wash, please? And she ran out and she got the doctors, and they came in and they said, you shouldn't be sitting up, you know, you're dying. They told members of my family to prepare for my funeral. And I said, I'd like a wash, please. And they brought me in this bowl of water with this sponge, and I started to wash this really painful rash. And as I washed it, this rash just went right in front of the doctor's eyes, and the doctor stood there scratching his head. And then I said, can I have something to eat, please? I hadn't eaten in a couple of weeks. They'd been managing to get stuff down a feeding tube. and they brought me jelly and toast and things like that, and started eating. And before all that happened, I'd had a job, and I got made redundant, so I'd got £200 of redundancy money. And I said, okay, well, you're getting better. We need to get you better before you leave. You're 6'6" right now. You can leave when you're 8 stone. So I took that as a personal challenge. I'd taken Jesus into my life. People came in to pray with me, and they were bringing me in tins of spam and sweets. And every meal they were bringing in, I was eating that and then going down into the canteen to buy another meal. And then at 7:30 at night, there was a local pizza shop that we delivered to for 12-inch pizzas for myself and one for the nurses every night. And within a couple of weeks, I got up to 8 stone 6. And they said, okay, you can go home. And I just started to heal, and I started going to church, and I started learning more about God and about Christ and about identity. I started on this thing called the School of Supernatural Life through our church, which teaches you that God is so naturally supernatural, but supernaturally natural, and that our true identity is of the princes and princesses of a heavenly throne, that we are adopted back into the family. So I started learning about that, and I started learning about family, and I hadn't spoken to my mum for quite a while, and we were both as bad as each other, I guess. And I started to get better and started to build myself up. And I did an alpha course, and through the years, I've done 22 alphas, and most of them I've done as an assistant leader. I've done 9 years on the School of Supernatural Life, which is a 2-year course. I just wouldn't leave, and I'm one of the leadership team now on there. And my life is just so much better. And I started using that, and I started using creativity to tell my story. And after I wrote the first 2 books, I thought, what can I do? And then COVID hit. Married the year before, COVID hit. And it all became a bit difficult, and it all became a bit weird, didn't it, all around the world?
Mm-hmm. Isolation, and also each person would have handled it in a different manner. But if you're used to being around people, to be isolated was a very difficult time. And for people that already feel isolated to now be forced to be isolated, we're not even supposed to be isolated like that.
I struggled with that. I really did. And I've got a friend by the name of Jason Edwards, who's a motivational speaker, and he helps people. He's also a hostage and barricade negotiator, one of the best in England. We spoke, and I needed something to put my mind into. I'd written the first couple of books, and I'd worked on another book with someone else, and that had been brought out. I was managing 2021. We hit another lockdown in Britain, and that was the hardest one. And while the government were enforcing all these harsh rules on us, they were partying, and less said about that better.
That's a whole other podcast.
But I struggled. I really did struggle. And so I started, Jason said, why don't you do podcasts? And I'd done the films that I'd been in, the Martin Scorsese films that I'd worked on, the Martin Scorsese produced films I worked on, I should say, The Souvenir and The Souvenir Part 2 back in 2016 and 17. As an authenticity consultant, I played Ray in the films. I'd got to do a couple of podcasts because of that, and because they were made by A24. There are people out there that like A24 films, so I did a couple of things like that. I enjoyed it, so I thought, well, what can I do? Started learning criminology. I'd started learning journalism online. I'd started doing courses, but I needed some output. I couldn't make films. I couldn't physically go out and make films anymore. So Jason said, why don't we do a podcast? So who would I interview? And he said, me. So I interviewed him, and he started talking about negotiation and things like that. And then I put it out. In fact, we did it live over Facebook. And it got about 1,500 views. And I was like, okay, maybe we'll give this another go. And then I got another guy from the sort of network that I'm involved in, the Recovery Network and the Ex-Criminals Network. And I interviewed him, and that got few hundred views, and I thought, okay, mate. And then there's a guy, ex-policeman, ex-undercover policeman, who became a broadcaster by the name of Peter Blexley, who's a sort of a big name in Britain. And I just reached out to him and said, look, would you do it? And he went, yeah, I will. And I did that. And that was when I really sort of felt comfortable in doing it. It was a really emotional podcast. Then I just started doing these podcasts and reaching out to people and telling them my name is Jack and I'm a recovering addict. And before I started doing this, I was homeless, and just telling my story. And people kept coming on, and I got several celebrities, including Chesney Hawkes over the years, and everything from celebrities to people that have spent time in prison for murder. It's been a wide range of guests. And then people said, well, you do your own podcast, but we'd like to hear a bit more of your story. So I started doing other people's podcasts and telling my story. And I actually found it cathartic in my story and learning my narrative and how I'd seen my life up until then, and how other people saw me. And in some people's narrative, I'm the villain. In my narrative, I was the villain. But then the villain, I've lived long enough now where the villain became the hero.
Yes. Also a healer. A healer,
Yeah.
because by sharing, I mean, you're talking to somebody who's not experienced homelessness, who's not indulged in criminal behavior, who's not been addicted. Like, all these things that you're talking to me have not been, like, there's such new things to hear about. And, you know, some people need to experience it to understand it. I've experienced enough of my own hardships that I understand certain things. But when a person hasn't experienced it, for somebody who has to share their story and their experience in detail, it really just helps us to not have to ever experience it, because we can have a place of understanding what that's to be in prison, to be in a hospital with really poor health, to be in an environment where you're being coerced and controlled. You don't need to be in those places. If somebody's been in those spaces and they're sharing their story, that is healing for you and for people to avoid them from being in those positions.
But I also think it's a responsibility. If we have lived a certain way of life, if we've been through things that have taken us through different parts of life and different situations, and we've got through it and survived it, I believe it is a responsibility to share. If you have a voice, you should use your voice. And if you can't use your voice, then I will help amplify your voice, because there are so many people that are marginalised. And there are people out there with a lot worse story than me, believe me. The stuff that I've been through, to them, is minor. You see, in that, we're victims, right? We're victims of the circumstance. We're victims of the people. And if we're lucky, we survive that and we become survivors. Many people never get past victim. Many people stay victim for their whole life. If you're lucky, you'll become a survivor. You'll survive it. And that comes with its own mentality. And many think that when you go from victim to survivor, that's it. And yes, survivors, they talk about their recovery, but when you're a survivor, you're only at a certain point of that recovery. Because what many people don't realise is there's another step to that, survivor to thriver. And that's what I'm now doing. I'm thriving because I'm using the thing that I find cathartic to help educate people and to say to other men, well, all survivors, but I look for other men because of the stuff that gets aimed at me, saying that I can't possibly know the brutality of rape because I'm a man. Well, I can, because I've been there. Well, no, that's just sexual assault. I'm like, no, that's rape. I went through that. I don't know what it's like for a woman. I can imagine, because I'm told that my story doesn't matter. And this has happened from other survivors too. At the end of the day, I've got survivors at heart, which is why I really work to help survivors tell their stories. And that's how I became the accidental journalist, because I accidentally fell into, from wanting to be an actor and a filmmaker and a writer, into serious journalism, into telling other people's stories. If that's not journalism, what is? So I became the accidental journalist, and I was still the accidental journalist because I like the title. It's fun to say I'm the accidental journalist, but I am incidental in my work. I am incidental in my words. When I speak, I want people to hear my story, but I don't just want people to hear my story. I want to convey the stories of others that have had it as bad as me, worse than me. I want to be able to give them a anchor point, because from brokenness comes resilience. We learn to be resilient. And then if we're lucky, and if we've got the right people around us, like I've had, the ones that nurture us and nurture our gifts and our abilities spiritually, the ones that bring God to us, help us find purpose from our pain. Because we might feel hopeless and helpless, but the only difference between hopeless and helpless is the word LESS. You can replace them with another 4 letters, full, FULL, hopeful, helpful. And it's listening to other people's wisdom. I've not learned all this on my own. I'm not some guru. I talk to God, but I'm not this thing that's had all this stuff downloaded into his head via a godly manner. I've had people really teach me this and say, look, Jack, this is where you're at and this is how I dealt with it. Perhaps you could deal with it this way. Or if you can't deal with it this way, perhaps you can do this. And it's been through trial and error.
One of the things about your story that you're bringing to light for a lot of people is there's a lot of talk about looking in the mirror and looking at yourself and being at one with that person. But for me, that analogy doesn't always work, because you can look in the mirror and you'll see a person and you will see whatever you see. But what you feel on the inside, you can't see that in the mirror. It's not going to be reflected in how you look. You can look healthy, but you can feel so broken. You can look unhealthy, but you can feel okay. So it's not always about how we look. When I hear your story, it's almost like one thing that you're really raising awareness for is that we can't run from ourselves. And the fact that you are in the same city, that you have indulged in all these behaviors and you have made a name for yourself that you didn't even like for yourself, and to stay there and face it and prove that's not who I am, not to anybody else, but you did it for yourself, that I'm not that person anymore. So you had to go through all of the people who are still bringing you back to where you were, trolling you, telling you that this is your fault. And to overcome that and stay, that's the strong, to me, that is like so strong, to just stay there and overcome it all. That is the most resilience that any person can have.
Yeah, God has prepared me for that my whole life. I'm not saying that it's all been easy since I've been sober, because it hasn't. I lost my biological mum in 2017. I lost a niece to violence in 2017, 3 months after I lost my mum. As you know, I lost both of my parents recently. I've lost friends to suicide. I've had family that really wouldn't talk to me when I tried to reach out, when I tried to make amends. But I'm blessed because I was asked by my niece to write the eulogy for my mum and dad's funeral and read it. And I didn't think I had the strength, but I did. And I showed that family that always saw me as the black sheep that I became something else. And because of that, I now have rekindled relationships with other family, with cousins and things like that, which is absolutely beautiful. I have a great relationship with my daughter. I love my wife. My daughter's going to university in September to study forensic psychology. I've got stepkids that I love. I've got a community that is very nurturing. I live about 9 miles away from where I was, in a a small town that's adopted me as part of its own, that I'm respected. People know me when I walk down the street. I get hugs. People stop and talk to me. They don't cross the road to get away from me. And yeah, there are still people out there that will be critics. And yeah, there are still people out there that will still think, oh, well, he's still that same person that he was. Leopards don't change its spots. Well, no, the leopard can't change its spots because that's a physical thing. That's down to genetics. Them spots are down to DNA. Well, my DNA is steeped in God. I know this, right? And I can change my physical appearance to the fact that I've got a beard and I've got hair now, but that's no real change. Everything else, I'm a different man, and people can see that. And those that are out there, and I still get it, you haven't changed and things like that. Well, if they don't believe it now, they're never going to believe it. And that's down to them. That's not my fault. That's not something that I can control. One thing but my mum used to say was, it's mind over matter. If you don't mind, they don't matter. What they think doesn't matter. And I found out that me and my mum, my adopted mum, actually had pretty similar lives from when my mum was younger. And that's why she adopted me. And I only found this out because I was asked to go back and do the eulogy because I'd changed and people could see I'd changed. I'm incredibly blessed in the life that I have. It's steeped in God, it's steeped in family, it's steeped in church, but it's also steeped in education, speaking. I'm not the most eloquent of speakers at times. I sometimes do these and people can't understand my accent, my Yorkshire accent, and I have to put a bit more of an RP on it and speak a bit more, a bit posher. You'll notice that through some of the things that I've done, but it's me. I'm not the mistakes that I made. If there's one thing that I can convey to anyone watching this, is you are not the mistakes that you've made. The situations that you found yourself in, the badness, you're not the sin, you're not the shame, you're not the guilt. Not your fault. These things are not your fault. And what other people think about you is none of your business.
You will speak to so many people. Your story impacted me. I never went through anything that you went through. I was so curious and I was so, oh my God, actually, like, a hurt. It hurts me when children suffer. Really does. It just hurts me because then believing in God as well, having faith, they're whipped from God and they're only surrounded by humans. And I think that, well, it's a struggle to find God when you're in those positions. So when I hear your story, I've listened to your other podcasts and there's so much resilience, you said, and there's so much light and sparkle in the way you tell it. Story is one word, but experiences, the way you share it. Somebody could look at you and they would not even know that you went through that. If they're walking across the street to be next to you, they are seeing and they're feeling something completely different to who you were. And only you know that transition that you've gone through. You know the transformation that you've gone through. There's people who have seen bits and parts of you, but you're the one who's fully faced it. And that's why you're so full with God. I want to learn so much more still about you, but I know we're out of time.
The Council of Survivors' Voices. So we work together as survivors to help work through some stuff, but also we can then take those survivors and match them up with creatives, and we can help them find, because I found healing in creativity. So I'm a great believer in the power of story and the power of narrative. And so we help people to take back their narrative and to change it. We can change our own narrative. We're in charge of our story. We're in charge of our own life, our own book, our own chapter. We're not in control of what's happened. They're things that are in the past and we can write about them and we can speak about them. But we're in charge of where we go now. We can shape our chapter, our narrative, how we see ourselves and how other people see us. I'm a 6'1", 16.5 stone bloke with scruffy hair and a scruffy beard. I can look imposing, I get it. when I'm out on the street. But because I'm in a town where people know me, they love me, and they've nurtured me for the past 11 years as a town, they know that I'm safe. They know what I've been through. I'm honest. I'm open. I'm fully honest about the life that I've led because I do this, and I'll tell them every podcast that I do because I believe in openness. I can't recover anonymously anymore. I've tried that. It didn't work. I need to recover out loud so other people can find recovery in an anonymous way. We don't have to have that orphan spirit because God loves you. I love you. And I'm always there for people to drop me a message, jump on my website, point you straight to my email address, and I'll be happy to talk to you. I'll be happy to help signpost you. But know that you're loved. Know that you're not alone. Know that it's not your fault. Know that you're not what's happened to you. Know that that guilt and that shame isn't yours. That trauma, that isn't yours. It wasn't caused by you. That was caused by someone else. That's their baggage, not yours. Trauma's workable. Suicide isn't. And if you're at that point where you're feeling that you're alone, and you're at that point where you're feeling that people would be better off without you, it won't. You enrich so many people's lives. You're loved more than you think. You're respected more than you think. If you've got no one to reach out, I'll listen. Because I've been at the point where I thought nobody will listen to me.
Thank you, Jack, for that beautiful closing statement. Thank you for being there for the viewers, and thank you for being there for other people, changing your story, changing your narrative to be someone of influence, someone who can make a change and be the change that we all want to see. We all want to hear stories about people that overcome challenges and then they are the change in the world that we all wish to see. I really appreciate having you on my podcast. And this won't be the last time that we'll be connecting. That's it for Heartbeat with Harjeet. Thank you for watching, and we'll look forward to seeing you again next week.
Thanks for having me.